Good morning and welcome back to Sun Up on 7. Just before the break, we were joined by Dr. Fernando Cuellar talking about his projections for COVID and its possible surge coming from the Easter vacation. But now we're jumping into a different topic, and we are here joined with Mr. Mario Muschamp of TIDE, which is the Toledo Institute for Development and Environment. Good morning, Mr. Muschamp. Welcome to Sun Up on 7. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning. Doing fine. Definitely glad to be here. Certainly to share some information in terms of wildland fire management in Belize.
Great.
You know, we're actually in the fire season, and we need to make sure that the people out there who uses fire are responsible and use it adequately to ensure that those fires only burn and to meet specific objectives, and does not have any kind of negative impact on the environment.
Most definitely. Mr. Morrow, for viewers that may not be aware of what TIDE is, could you give us a general background of what TIDE is, what it stands for, what it does, so they can be able to know and put into context?
So basically, TIDE is the Toledo Institute for Development and Environment. TIDE was founded in 1997. With the sole purpose of natural resource management here in southern Belize. So we do a lot of work in terms of protected areas management. So we co-manage 3 protected areas here in southern Belize, 2 terrestrial base and 1 marine, so the Port Honduras Marine Reserve. And then we have the TIDE private protected lands and the Pains Peak National Park. So as a part of that, we do a lot of education and outreach. We do community livelihoods, alternative livelihoods. We do research and monitoring, enforcement of existing laws, such as the Fisheries and Forestry Act and National Park Systems Act and those kind of things. But we work very closely with our stakeholders, because without our stakeholders, none of this would be possible. The people that sacrifice and give up things for these areas to be declared as protected areas and manage these areas certainly need to be involved. And that's the road that we are trying to go here at TIDE, to ensure that we involve all stakeholders in the management of these protected areas.
Thank you for that, Mr. Muschamp. And I'm glad that you clarified that there's 2 terrestrial areas and 1 marine area, protected areas, that is. And in terms, now jumping into our segment with dealing with fire safety. We are in the dry season. It's very, very hot and dry season
Just
this time
one
around. Could you give our viewers a bit of information as it relates to prevention of fires?
Yeah, certainly. Definitely this time of the year, we want to see how we can prevent as much as possible. Because we're getting into the hottest and the driest time of the year. And so the fire behavior and the effects of those fires are going to be very, very high in terms of negative impacts to the environment. So we want to ensure that people are doing fires based on their understanding of fire behavior and the factors that influence how that fire will behave, and ensuring that those people who are using fire has the capacity and the necessary equipment to use it properly, so we don't get any kind of escape occurring and we don't burn what we don't want to burn. So basically using the weather conditions, the conditions of the fuel, and your capacity to ensure that those fires are done properly and safe.
Mr. Muschamp, could you educate our viewers as well as to what a person can do in their yard to prevent any fires? I know, and I'm speaking from a little experience here, where a couple of years ago there was a huge fire near my house, but we realized that it was a lot of dry leaves, and leaves that just almost in a second just combusted. Envelop the whole trees and everything like that. What can a person do in order to protect themselves?
First of all, if you don't want to burn your house, you have to ensure that there's enough green space around and nothing that will ignite. In the case of you have to ignite anything, you want to ensure that you have enough clearance around those that around that area to ensure that we don't get any escape occurring. So you don't want the fire to escape. So you want to ensure that you put in what we call fire breaks or fire pass in terms of the local terms, so that when you burn, that fire won't get away from you. And you want to not burn during the hottest or the windiest time, because most of the time, how fire spread is from flying ambers and so on. And so with heavy winds, your ambers are going to fly very far.
Right.
So you don't want to use a whole lot. You don't want to burn when it's too windy or it's too hot and too dry, because then that's a recipe for escape to happen.
So right now, have you seen any, besides, I know I'm thinking you are aware of what happened in Orange Walk with BSI, when it came to the combustion of the bagash. When it comes to that kind of thing happening for fires, how are people supposed to be managing it in case the fire department can't reach there fast enough? Like, what are the steps that someone should take if they see their neighbor is going through this or so? I get that we call the fire station, but is there anything that they can personally do as well, especially if it's getting out of hand and nobody has come yet?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, again, like I say, you have to understand fire behavior and what are the things that are driving that fire. And we all know that fire, for you to get combustion, you need three things. You have to have a heat source, you have to have oxygen and fuel. And so for you to actually put that fire out, you have to address one of those three things. Once you take one of those out, you're going to put that fire out. So if you understand how that fire is behaving, meaning that you want to know how fast it's moving, the heat intensity, and that will be telling how you will be able to judge that intensity is looking at the height of the flames and the length of the flames. And then once you understand what those are, then you can determine how you will be able to address that fire. Some fires you can go directly and deal with it if the flames are low and the intensity is not too high. But if you have a fast-moving, high-intensity fires, you might have to do a different type of tactics to address that one. You might have to pull away from that fire and put in fire breaks way ahead that you'll be able to stop and put that fire out. But you can prevent it by definitely taking care of your place, ensuring that you manage your fuels, and keep enough green space around your area to protect you from any damage.
I know as we're heading into the summer months or the hotter months, there's a lot of people that are burning. They're burning trash for the prevention of mosquitoes and village life. As we know, we pass through the villages them and we always smell this smoke coming around. And in some regards, it is against the law to be burning bushes like that, no? Could you give a word of advice for people that are doing that?
Well, basically, as it relates to laws, there are three laws dealing with fire currently in the country. One is the Forest Fire Prevention Act. And that law basically gives the minister power to declare an area, especially after natural disasters, a no-fire zone, to prevent any kind of catastrophic fires from happening in those places. The second one is the negligent use of fires, and that leads to arson. And so if you are using fire negligently and not being responsible, then you can be charged and you can be taken to court for the negligent use of fire. And then we have the Agricultural Fires Act, which is the one that I really want to touch a lot on, because most people currently are clearing land and getting prepared to burn those lands for agricultural purposes. And for you to do that, you must get a permit from the Agriculture Department or the Forest Department for you to be able to put fire on such lands. And there must be conditions put in place. So you must put in your fire breaks. There's a certain time of the day that you're allowed to burn. And then we try to, in our case, it's either early morning or late evening when conditions are much favorable for safe use of fire. So we want people to make sure that you don't burn during the hottest and the windiest time of the day, because then more than likely that fire is going to behave in a way that you won't be able to control it. And so you want to get the coolest fire possible that you'll be able to manage that fire so it doesn't get away from you.
Right.
Hearing the term cool fire is just such a weird term, because you don't think about cool when you think about fire. But thank you so much, Mr. Mario, for sharing the insight about what people can do when it comes to dealing with a huge fire, preventing a fire. As we're wrapping up this segment, is there any final words you want to give to the public at home when it comes to fire management, fire prevention, in general, whatever take that you think that they should know moving forward, especially while we're getting into the hotter times?
Well, certainly we know that under hot, dry, windy conditions, please do not use any fire because that's the recipe for disaster. That's the recipe that fire is going to get away from you. So understanding fire behavior is crucial here when you're going to be dealing with fire and the factors that influence how that fire will behave. So the factors that will influence how it behaves is definitely the temperature. And when we talk about temperature, we talk about, well, I have to say the weather. And when we talk about weather, we're talking about temperature, we're talking about relative humidity, and we're talking about wind. And for us, it would be wind speed. Because then that's the thing that will transport embers and then can take that fire outside the area you want to burn. So people have to understand fire behavior for you to use fire safely and properly. Quick message, make it a date to burn early or late because you don't want to hit the hottest time of the day because then that's when that fire is going to give you problems. If you catch it early morning before the sun gets too hot and it gets too dry and windy, you have a good chance that you'll be able to manage that fire. Or you wait late afternoon, moving in towards nighttime when temperatures start going down, relative humidity starts rising, and usually the winds will start falling again. And so, those conditions will be best for you to burn. Right. As it relates to farmers, a lot of farmers want it to be very dry before they burn, but they don't understand when it's too dry, you're actually losing nutrients that can go back from your fire into the soil. Because when you burn when it's too dry, you're burning to that white ash. And then with that, just a small wind takes that ash away, so you lose that nutrients. If you burn when it's under little wetter conditions, when you left with that black ash, then that black ash becomes nutrients and it goes back into the soil and it can improve and increase your yield from your crops.
Thank you for that.
Definitely
Agricultural
a lot
tip.
of tips, right? And you know how you could put the nutrients back right into your soil. So thank you so much, Mr. Mushram, for being here, for sharing your insight. I'm hoping people can be able to take different nuggets and pass it on to their friends too as well. If you're not a farmer, if you're not somebody that deals with the bush and all of the whole combustion and all these things, but you know a friend that does need this information, by all means, pass it on. And so with that, we go to our next commercial break. When we're back, we're going to be talking to Chef Jenny about fish fraud. How can we identify what's been happening when they stick on the scale or whatever it is? How can we know what they're selling to us? Stay tuned for that exciting conversation. We'll be right back.